Today, we're going to dive into a landmark Indian Supreme Court case that completely reshaped the meaning of cruelty in a marriage. It's a story about a relationship that imploded, a legal system that, frankly, failed for over a decade, and a final judgment that still echoes in divorce law today.
So, picture this. It all began with a marriage that lasted just 5 months. That's it. Two people who thought they were starting a life together, but it was over before it really even began. But here's the truly shocking part. It took 13 long years in court to legally end that 5-month marriage. Think about that, a legal battle nearly 30 times longer than the actual relationship. This insane delay really forced India's highest court to grapple with a huge question. Where exactly is the legal line between the normal struggles and hardships of marriage and genuine, unbearable cruelty? Okay, so to really get why this case is so important, we have to start with the people involved, the human story at the heart of it all. All right, so our story starts with Vinita Saxena and Pankaj Pandit. They were educated, they knew each other from college, and back in February 1993, they had an intercaste love marriage, which was a pretty big deal at the time. So this was a union based on their own choice, their own consent. But almost right away, the marriage started to unravel. Vinita found out something critical that had been hidden from her. Her new husband, Pankaj, was suffering from paranoid schizophrenia. And not only that, he'd been getting treatment for it even before they got married. So, as you can imagine, this hidden illness became the catalyst for a series of absolutely harrowing events over the next 5 months. Events that would become the entire basis for Vinita's divorce petition on the grounds of cruelty. And the breaking point, it all came down to one single horrific day, July 4th, 1993. Vinita tries to talk about their problems, and in return, she says she was blamed for her husband's condition and beaten mercilessly. Later that same day, Pankaj tried to take his own life by drinking pesticide. He ended up in the hospital for 4 days, where he received psychiatric care. So Vinita's case was built on these pillars. She alleged physical abuse, the constant mental anguish of being blamed for his illness, the sheer trauma of his suicide attempt, and on top of all that, the fact that the marriage was never even consummated. And crucially, she had medical records to back up his diagnosis. Now, with all of this evidence, you might think the case would be pretty straightforward, but it wasn't. For the next decade, 2 different courts, the trial court and then the high court, denied her petition for divorce. They trapped her in a marriage that existed only on paper. And this is where it gets really mind-boggling. Look at the disconnect here. On one side, you have all this substantive evidence, a doctor's testimony, medical records, eyewitnesses. On the other side, the court's reasons for saying no? They focused on procedural gaps. They argued the diagnosis wasn't proven enough, that no police report was filed for the assault, and, get this, that she couldn't provide specific dates for every single incident. Basically, the lower courts decided that because certain boxes weren't ticked, the incidents just weren't grave and weighty enough to legally count as cruelty. They put procedure and technicalities over the profound human suffering at the very core of the case. All right, so let's turn to the final appeal. After 13 years, this case finally lands in front of the Supreme Court of India, and they just proceeded to completely dismantle the lower court's approach by re-examining what cruelty even means in the first place. So the key law here was Section 13(1)IA of the Hindu Marriage Act. It allows for divorce on the grounds of cruelty. But here's the thing. The act never actually defines cruelty. It just leaves it up to the courts to interpret what it means, on a case-by-case basis. And this is where we get this incredibly powerful statement from the judgment. Justice Lakshmanan wrote that mental cruelty isn't about counting how many bad things happened. No, it's about the intensity, gravity, and stigmatic impact of an act, even if it happens only one time. That one sentence changed everything. And this table just illustrates the new standard perfectly. The court drew a clear line between the ordinary wear and tear of a marriage, quarrels, disagreements, and true mental cruelty. We're talking grave conduct that causes sustained mental pain and completely destroys the very foundation of the marriage. So how did the Supreme Court take this fresh perspective and apply it to the facts of Vinita Saxena's case? Let's break down their logic. It's really brilliant. First, they said context is key. Cruelty isn't some abstract idea. Second, they confirmed that quality trumps quantity. A single, severe event like a suicide attempt, that's enough. Third, and this was a direct shot at the lower courts, they declared that substance matters more than procedure. A lack of police reports doesn't just erase credible testimony. And finally, they just looked at the whole picture, the cumulative effect of everything Vinita had been through.
And on that basis, the Supreme Court overturned the previous rulings and granted the divorce. After 13 years of being legally bound to a man she hadn't seen in over a decade, Vinita Saxena was finally free.
So, what's the lasting impact here? Why does this case still matter so much? Well, this wasn't just a victory for one woman. The case established critical legal principles that protect people in toxic marriages to this very day. The legacy of this case is really fourfold. It established that the intensity of a cruel act is more important than how often it happens. It demanded that courts look at the specific context of a couple's life. It prioritized real harm over procedural checklists. And most importantly, it affirmed that no one should be legally required to stay in a marriage that destroys their well-being and their dignity. And this case leaves all of us with a really vital question to think about. How should our laws balance the value we place on marriage as an institution with a person's fundamental right to be safe and to live a life free from harm?